Well, hey, it's good to be with you this way while we're away from the country, while we're in Thailand. It's a good way that we can get together and use modern technology to continue with our worship services. So this is the first of 3 weeks that we'll be away. And so we are in the city of Bangkok, the Venice of the East. Beautiful big city of about 10 to 12 million people. And so we are involved in ministries over there, doing prison ministry and ministries with refugees, and work with our seminary over there as well. So we got a lot of things going on this week, but we're missing you guys, but hope y'all are doing well, and look forward to getting reconnected in a couple of weeks. So today I want us to look at the topic of finding grace in the everyday. Next week we'll be looking at a different topic. We'll be thinking about when God seems very far away. And then in our last week together by video, we'll be talking about having friends in high places. So let's talk a little bit about finding grace every day. I want to read from the Gospel of John, John chapter 1. It says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God, and all things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to bear witness about the light, that all might believe through him. Now he was not the light, but he came to bear witness about the light. The true light, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him. Yet the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become the children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but they were born of God. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. John bore witness about him and cried out, 'This is he of whom I said, he who comes after me ranks before me because he was before me.' And then he concludes with, 'For from his fullness we have all received grace upon grace.'" The awareness of grace has long been a part of the human experience, and not just within the Judeo-Christian world. There's this sense of there being something benevolent, something good that's let loose in the world. The 19th century Hindu mystic Ramakrishna says, "The winds of God's grace are always blowing. It is for us to raise our sails." There's the 13th century Sufi mystic Rumi, who said, be watchful. The grace of God appears suddenly, and it comes without warning to an open heart." Rabbi Rami Shapiro says, "Grace is unlimited and all-encompassing." So what do we mean when we talk about grace? Grace is God's favor, God's benevolence, his goodness, his kindness that's bestowed on mankind. So there are a lot of synonyms people use to describe grace, and it all gets kind of rolled together in the package of that one word. But God's help, his strength, his blessing, his kindness, salvation, his gifts to us, his enlightenment, his solace, his comfort, his protection, his presence, his love. We could just mention so many things, and they're all rolled up together in this concept of grace. But the question today is how effective are we? How adept are we in seeing and appreciating God's grace day by day? Scott Peck, the author of the book The Road Less Traveled, says that grace is a powerful force originating outside of human consciousness, which nurtures the spiritual growth of human beings. So he identifies that force as a loving, caring God. That's where grace comes from. So what we need to be able to do is we need to open ourselves to occurrences of grace. We need to pay attention, or as Frederick Buechner says, we need to stop, look, and listen to life. So So we need to develop that discipline of paying attention to what's going on around us. Grace appears to us in many ways. We look at kind of the broad strokes first. Grace appears in life's passages or its transitions, things like births and marriages and accomplishments and things like that. Grace appears in the familiar and the commonplace. It could be in the form of memories or dreams or songs or movies or holiday rituals, a lot of different ways that it can come. Grace can also come to us in the painfully harsh, through conflict, through the loss of a job, the death of a loved one, or divorce, which is the death of a marriage. I know that's sometimes kind of hard for us to imagine that grace can be found in something like that. But I recall some years ago when we were getting ready to go over to Thailand to live and be a part of the international missions there, we had some very dear friends of ours that lived a couple of hours away from us. And she had been having some health difficulties. She had contracted cancer and had been undergoing treatments, and things actually were not looking very good for her. And so we decided that before we left to go to Thailand, it would be good for us to be able to go and see them, because we weren't sure if we would ever see Beth again. So we went we went to see David and Beth, and they were talking with us about all that they had gone through the different types of treatments that she had gone through all the tests, the studies, the diagnoses that kept coming back. And they talked about what they had learned about themselves, what they had learned about God. They talked about how much they had grown, not just individually, but they had grown closer as a couple as they went through this dark valley of this disease. And it was striking to me to hear them say, if we had the chance to roll back the calendar back to the time before that diagnosis of cancer, we wouldn't do it, because of all that we have gained, all that we have learned through this challenging time. We would not want to lose that. We would not want to give that up. And so all that we have been through has been worth it, because of the grace that they had received in learning more about themselves, learning more about God, and growing together as a couple. So they wouldn't want to go back to that time before they knew she had terminal cancer. And so even a painful time, there can still be the evidence of grace there. So let's see what we can find out about grace and how we can become more adept at paying attention to it. Ansel Adams, that famous photographer of an earlier age, said, "I believe the world is incomprehensibly beautiful, an endless prospect of magic and wonder." So if this world is such a beautiful world, we just need to pay attention. I have a colleague, a former colleague. One of the things I love about him is that he has never lost his sense of wonder. I remember one time we had gone to a conference together with him and his wife and Martha and me, and we were walking along a pathway heading toward a restaurant where we were going to eat. Of course, my mind was focused on, I want to get there because I'm ready to eat. But our travel was slowed down a lot because my friend kept stopping. Look at that! Look at that! Look at that! He was seeing all of these little things in nature. And even today, he sends us, by text message, he sends us pictures that he takes on the hikes that they go on every weekend. And sometimes they're just beautiful, grand landscapes of things. Sometimes he focuses in and he has spotted a little bug or a tiny little flower or something like that. But his pictures are beautiful because he sees things that the rest of us just pass by. We don't pay any attention to those things. And so he has that sense of wonder, just always looking for some little surprise, for some neat thing to talk about and to capture his attention. So we need to be able to do that. So my question is, what is it that catches your eye? What is it that brings a little skip to the step of your soul? What causes you to stop and marvel and contemplate? What strikes you as awesome? What causes you to ask questions you've never asked before or haven't asked in a long time? So what are those things in this world around us that you pay attention to, that you notice? Well, we need to find grace. We need to look for grace. We need to look for it in other people. We need to look for grace in the little things they may say and the art or music they create, or even just the small acts of kindness. We need to be attentive and recognize grace for what it is. But one of the expectations of all of us as believers is that we are not just to become adept at seeing grace around us, but we are also to be the source of grace for others. So we need to open ourselves up to occurrences of grace that come into us, but also the grace that goes out from us to others. Another thing we need to do is, okay, here's a 25-cent word. We need to notice synchronicity. In other words, consider the timing of events. Carl Jung says, the simultaneous occurrence of events with no cause and effect relationship that has meaning beyond mere coincidence. Sometimes things happen together that we don't expect that they happen together. We don't expect what will come from those events. You've heard me say before, probably, our walk of faith with the Lord is like playing a divine game of connect the dots with God. God sees the picture. If you have a connect the dot books, you have all these little dots here. We can't really tell what the picture is to start with. But eventually, as little by little as we connect the dots, we begin to see it. Well, God knows what the end picture is. Our objective is just to find the next dot, connect that. So we need to take wonder in things. For example, I remember a coincidence. That's what we'll call it, a coincidence that happened while we were serving in Bangkok. I was serving as the English program director at the Baptist Student Center, which is a language school. There were about 600 language schools in Bangkok, and we were one of only 2 that had contracts with the government to provide English instruction to both city and central government officials. And one of the things that I had to do was to be sure that we were always ready to fulfill the needs of the training division for example, for the Bangkok Metropolitan Administration. And so one day I got a phone call, and it was the director of the training division, and he told me that they had a unique opportunity for the city planners of Bangkok to travel to the U.S. for a conference. But they weren't confident about their English language skills, particularly the trade language or the technical language of city planning in English. And so they wanted to know, could we do a course in teaching the trade language for city planners who were planning to go to the U.S.? Of course, my default answer was always, yes, sure, we can do that. And so we made that commitment that we would teach a course for them to help them to beef up their English language skills as city planners. But then as soon as I hung up the phone, I had to start scrambling about how best to do that. And so I got all the teachers together, both our long-term teachers and also some of the volunteer teachers that had just come in for this next 6-week term. So I got them all together and said, this is what we got to find. Go to the library, see what you can find in our library of resource books. A couple of them, I said, I need you to get on the internet and start researching all you can about the trade language. But while I was doing that, one of the volunteers who had just gotten there just a couple of days before, hadn't started teaching yet, he raised his hand and said, by the way, I just want to let you know that I have just retired from a career as a city planner. He said, I would be delighted to teach that course. Well, I had no idea that there was going to be a course for city planning. That fellow had no idea there was going to be a course needed for city planners, but God did. And just bringing all of that together, the need that was going to be coming, but he went ahead and God already had provided the resources that we needed in order to fulfill that request from the city government to teach that trade language. So God is just amazing in the way that He brings things together, the timing of things, and so we just need to remember that. We need to recognize the messages of grace, and grace comes to us in so many different ways. Sometimes grace comes to us through just random meetings, doors of opportunity that open when you're not expecting them to open. When Martha and I were first married, just a few weeks after the wedding, we moved to Louisville, Kentucky, where I was to start seminary, and Martha would be starting graduate school. But there had been a promise of a job. Martha was a teacher, school teacher, and we had already talked with the school district there in Louisville, and they had assured her that with her background, with certification in both English and in math, that it would be an easy fix. They would be able to place her with no problems whatsoever. So we got to Louisville and expecting to be able to, for at least one of us to have a job just right away. And when she contacted the school district again, a lot had happened since our previous contact. A court order had come down for the city schools to be desegregated, and so there was going to be busing and all of this. And so the school district put everything else on hold. Everything was frozen, including the hiring of new teachers, until they could get past that hurdle of and the chaos of busing all these students around to desegregate the schools. So this was a long time ago. Well, we were just there a few days when Martha and somebody else who lived in the apartment complex where we lived, the two ladies decided that they would go jogging down at the water reservoir, which is just a few blocks down from where our apartment was. And this was the first, and actually I think it was the last time that Martha did that. But while these two folks were just kind of jogging around the water reservoir and getting to know each other a little bit better, they encountered another jogger, and they just fell into conversation. And in the course of that conversation, Martha learned of a private school that was hiring and was in desperate need of teachers. And so the end result from that random encounter with that jogger, whose name we don't recall, was that, ta-da, she had a job. And so that was another fascinating expression of grace from that random meeting. And have you ever had those times when you've been struggling with something and you're reading along, or you're listening to the radio, or listening to a taped message or sermon or something of that nature, and something comes along that just happens to address what you're struggling with? It's the type of thing that you hear something or you read something and you think, that's exactly what I needed to hear. That's exactly what I needed to read. So God speaks to us very unexpectedly many times in just things that He puts in front of our path day by day. Sometimes we get affirmation when we think we're not doing very well. Sometimes we wonder, does anybody care? Do I matter to anybody else? And someone will come along and say something that just tells us, yes, you do matter. Yes, you do make a difference. And then there are times that we just go through life and we get spellbound by the beauty of nature. We see something like my friend that I was telling about. We see something in nature that just wakes us up, something we hadn't noticed before. So graces like these kind of give us the technical word, I think, is oomph. It gives us the energy that we need to carry on when we think that we've run out of steam, or when we've come to the end of our resources. So grace encourages and supports and lifts up, and it gives us insight and wisdom. But grace is something else too. It's also a reminder that we are loved. So all of these touches of grace are gifts. They're not things that we earned. They're not things that we deserve. And they are unique to us and our situation in life. One writer says, grace seeks us out and gives us what we need. So think of all the instances of grace in your life across the years. What do all those examples of grace tell you? That God would give you grace upon grace upon grace should communicate pretty clearly that he loves you and that in his eyes you matter to him. So what do we do with this? Well, let's just try to become more disciplined, to be attentive to what's going on around us. Look for the touches of grace. And I think that you will find that life takes on an enthusiasm for possibilities when you become more in tune with the expressions of grace all around us all the time. So when we get rather skillful in seeing the signs of grace, does that mean that everything's going to get easier or that there won't be problems coming? No, there will still be hard times. There will be losses. There will be disappointments. There will be pain and sorrow. But when those things come to those who believe that God shares his grace to strengthen and guide us, then we can face even the hard days in anticipation of blessing, joy, and wonder. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel says, just to be is a blessing. Just to live is holy. In other words, life itself is grace. It's a gift. May we become so much more adept at seeing grace in the ordinary experiences of our daily lives. Amen.